Hello, and welcome to another Lunch and Learn session sponsored by A.T. Still University Information Technology and Services Group. We're glad that you're with us for this broadcast from either Google Plus or YouTube. For those of you who have been with us before, you know that we conduct these sessions using video technology from Google Hangouts. And we've chosen to use Google Hangouts for the broadcast because it incorporates both some social networking and collaboration tools, and because it's available to everyone at ATSU. Now, we recognize that when it comes to communicating with some of these newer online tools, that many of us are just too busy with the day-to-day routine to kind of play with this new technology. So thus, we hope that you'll find not only the topics and information presented here are helpful to you, but we also hope that you'll get more comfortable with this form of online interaction and use these lunch and learn sessions as an opportunity to experiment and find better ways of communicating and collaborating with these online tools. So we ourselves are continuing to tweak various aspects of these lunch and learns, trying to figure out just how to build better virtual communities, share more ideas online, and kind of evolve our geographically separated campuses into a truly combined learning organization. So if you're participating for the first time, sit back at your computer or your mobile device, relax and enjoy. You don't have to do anything other than just watch the broadcast. Using Hangouts can be a very easy and passive way to participate in the session, and hopefully you'll learn something from today's topic. But if you've been here before, or if you're more adventurous, then we really want you to experiment with us by participating in the session. And participation is easy. You can add your comments to what we refer to as the chat room. The chat room is simply the comment area for this event on Google+, so go ahead and now if you would just type in your own version of Hello World or I'm Here into that chat. Don't worry, you won't break anything, and we're all relatively new at this type of online interaction, so just think of it as a chance to play as well as to learn. We really encourage you to interact with others throughout the session. Ask questions, share your opinions, post your thoughts, engage in some healthy and hopefully fun online discussion about the topic, or as I say, just throw virtual tomatoes by using the comment tools on the Google Plus event area. So we have people that are monitoring those comments, and we'll try and bring the ideas into the discussion and include your questions during the session. So the month of October has been proclaimed by the President of the United States to be National Security Awareness Month. And so for today's topic, we will be discussing several aspects of cybersecurity. It seems to be a well-accepted reality that security threats are becoming increasingly complex and challenging. We hear about concepts like cyber terrorism, cybercrime, and certainly we're all aware of things like identity theft. So the topic of cybersecurity really covers a broad spectrum of issues affecting things from national security to safety of institutional data to personal privacy to online predators. And today we have a group of people that will help us think through a variety of these issues that all fall under the big umbrella of cybersecurity. So first we have, we're fortunate to have three people from law enforcement to help us become more aware of some of these issues. We've got Deputy Chief Tim King and Detective Jeremy Cordray from the Kirksville Police Department here. So on my screen there on the far right side. Thanks guys for joining us. And then from Maricopa County we have Lieutenant Stephanie Molina with us. So I think it'll be a great conversation that we have on the law enforcement side. And then we're trying to also combine this with some other aspects of cybersecurity like HIPAA and FERPA. And so Dr. Deanna Hunsaker is the registrar at ATSU, and she will help us identify some aspects related to FERPA violations. Adam Moore is on the far left of my screen, and he is the relatively new manager of the Gutensohn Clinic Associates, I believe, yes, at ATSU, and he'll help us through some of the similar issues related to HIPAA. So I'm not even sure where to start. This topic is so broad that I'm sure we could have a good discussion on any one of a variety of topics. Cybersecurity can incorporate issues from various areas, ensuring the privacy of your health or your grades, and case of FERPA, all the way to ensuring the safety of your children or protecting yourself from identity theft. So I feel a little bit challenged as to how to weave this conversation together. But we're going to try, and I'm depending on the chat room to bring in some good questions to help us do that too. I guess I'm hopeful that at some level there's going to be some benefit in understanding what our role is as individuals, and really even as an institution, to protect the data that we work with, and then applying some of that understanding to how we can also protect ourselves, our personal identities, and maybe even going a little bit further, protecting our kids. So I think what I'll do is let's start on more of the bigger picture civil side of things, and talk about HIPAA and FERPA. So Adam, maybe we can start with you, and let's just kind of level check here. Why don't you tell us what HIPAA is, and a little bit about the background of it?
Well, HIPAA is the Health Information Portability and Accountability Act, passed in 1996 with the Clinton administration, and basically, we could spend hours just describing that, but it was basically passed so health providers could share information as we moved forward in a more of a electronic type of market and referral type of market, but they wanted to make sure we did that in a private sort of manner as we did that. And what we're starting to run into is when they started to enforce that, there wasn't really any stringent enforcement. It was more kind of a slap on the hand type of scenario. When you have your patient record, you've got your demographics as far as social security number, a photo ID, next of kin, all the way up to what procedures you've had done. And so they want to make sure that whenever you're transferring that record on to, say, Columbia or another institution, that's being done as private as possible. Where we run into issues not only here, but I think in the industry is you go into a waiting room in a very crowded facility, everybody sees you there. You're right across from a person visiting or getting a procedure done. So, that's not always as private as you'd want it to be. You walk back through the hallway, you have nurses talking, physicians talking, people probably hear more than they should. That's always an issue. So people, although HIPAA is a great thing, it's probably not always as private as everybody wants it to be. So there's a lot of gray area there already. Where it's really becoming an issue, like I said, was the enforcement part from 2003 to 2008 when they really started trying to pass dollars to administer it. Nobody was actually fined. They were out of about 23,000 individuals that they tried to settle some sort of lawsuit on. Only 8,000 actually went to some sort of justification. None of those individuals were actually fined. So there wasn't any backbone to it. And so now with the new Health Care Act, they have actually passed money with the stimulus package just for stricter regulations. And that's where a concern is from my end and for the whole healthcare industry as a whole, especially as we move to electronic medical records. And we've been working with the IT department here with Brian and Kurt, because EMR is a huge task, and now we're moving forward to what's called patient portals. By the end of 2013, we have to have patient portals installed, which means as a patient, you guys are supposed to be able to access your patient records via online.
So HIPAA really deals a lot more with the privacy components.
Correct.
And so help me kind of think through what are the privacy aspects of HIPAA, and why do we throw it in with cybersecurity?
The privacy aspect is pretty much keeping your private records intact, where no one else should be seeing them besides the eyes that are supposed to. In a nutshell,
so it's really protecting us from identity theft.
Yes, or from your neighbor snooping around, to be honest with you. And the cybersecurity part's a huge issue. When you have, just think identity theft from a debit card or whatnot, the same thing could possibly happen with a patient record, because they're looking at emailing as a big source of emailing patient records out to other facilities through the Health Information Exchange, which is now going on through a lot of agencies, and through meaningful use, which is a whole nother ball of wax, through the federal government. Now we have to meet 15 different measurements, core measurements now, through the outcome-based meaningful use data. One of those is patient education. So either you have to hand them their education or email it or fax it. However, that opens up a whole nother ball of wax, because whatever.
So that's a good point. I mean, education is going to be a big component, maybe in a different way, of all of these cybersecurity things.
Right. You're going to have to educate the patient themselves on how to protect them and their records, in a better manner, just kind of like identity theft.
Deanna, talk to us a little bit about FERPA. I mean, FERPA really deals with the same kind of issues in terms of privacy for students that HIPAA deals with for patients.
It's the exact same issues, Brian. What FERPA is the Family Educational Rights and Opportunity Act, and it's been with us since 1974, so it's nothing new. Interesting enough, though, the violations that I have seen over the last year that ATSU has experienced have been due to electronic communication. We're a lot quicker when we send emails, things like that, and we're not thinking about the attachments we've included. And so most of our risks so far have been internal, but it's still something, obviously ITS works closely with us to ensure our other systems are as protected as possible. Where it becomes important and how they ensure that schools are in compliance with FERPA is it is tied to our federal funding, which is very significant to ATSU as a whole. If we were to have FERPA violations and then eventually they decide that it's enough of a problem, it could remove our eligibility for federal financial funds. So many of our students are on loans, especially for our doctorate programs and our professional programs. So it would be very costly to the institution. We wouldn't be able to operate and do business, in essence. What FERPA covers is all educational records that are maintained by the institution or any party or agency that's acting on our behalf. And I think that's an area that I'm not sure here at ATSU we have as much awareness in thinking about the agencies that we're dealing with and the information we're sharing there and asking them how they're ensuring our security. But FERPA, what it doesn't apply to on education records is there may be cases where our public safety is involved, and it might be law enforcement. It could be that the student works here, and it might be employment. It could be medical records with immunization or alumni. None of those actually fall under FERPA. FERPA is just strictly, as a student, what protects my educational record. But many of the things that we have in our systems and what we communicate and how we identify a student may be a social security number, a date of birth, a full name. All of those things exist in our systems and on our spreadsheets and databases that we then pull for reports, etc. Most of our social security number, the general reports, are protected. We do just use a student ID, which does assist and facilitate with that. But certainly from a security threat and an identity threat, you have to be careful about what's in those databases or spreadsheets that you've saved and where you're sending them and how you're sending them.
So what are the kinds of things that we have to educate our faculty and staff against, sharing different kinds of information, either for HIPAA or for FERPA?
For FERPA, what I have found is reminding and educating everyone not to save it on their desktop. And there's just other more secure places to think about where we're saving spreadsheets if we even need to save them. A lot of times we hold on to things that potentially we've downloaded from our systems that it would be a good idea not to hold on to those, or I would feel more comfortable if I saved something to keep it within the ATSU network, because I feel more confident that I've got another level of protection there. And maybe that's wrong, and you can comment on that, Brian. But personally, I feel like I'm a little bit more protected than if I had it on my desktop and then I took my computer home and was working from a Panera, and just where my security responsibility lies. And then also sending emails, thinking about whether you need to password protect a spreadsheet if it's going from outside of ATSU. And when I say that, when I'm emailing directly within ATSU, I'm not going outside of our system, sending that email to another ATSU email address. But if it is not, I need to consider ways that I can protect that data. So I may password protect the spreadsheet and another email send the password to the recipient. Some different mechanisms like that I think we need to educate the community on.
Going electronic, Brian, is going to involve more than just clinic staff in the future on HIPAA standards and procedures. It's going to involve, legal counsel. It's going to involve IT. It's going to involve everybody here at the university, not just the clinic. So it's going to involve a broader spectrum of people that we have here. And I think, everybody here involved, needs to be aware of that moving forward.
Yeah, I think the electronic is really the cyber part of the whole security thing. Security has to take place whether it's electronically or not, but certainly as we move toward more electronic ways of interacting with people, there are different threats, different ways of getting at information that people shouldn't have, and different ways of interacting, which kind of brings in the law enforcement side of things too. And so I'll throw it out there for the law enforcement folks, give us a little bit of a sense just how big a problem is cybercrime. With respect to HIPAA or FERPA, I don't know that you guys can necessarily talk to those, but how prevalent is it? And do we see it increasing as people start using technology more frequently in lots of different ways?
Brian, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. I think cybercrime is only going to continue to grow. I mean, as every new technology comes out, someone's always looking for a way to be able to get around it, get through it. And I mean, we see that on a daily basis, whether it be through just frauds, fraudulent sales on the internet, clear up to the cyber sexual predator stuff that we deal with a lot on a daily basis. But basically, from what we see, from where we sit, is that every time something new comes out, somebody's figured out very quickly how to get around it, get through it. And so, if it's out in the internet world, you try as hard as you can to make it secure, but somebody's going to figure out a way to get around it, and that's when we have to start trying to figure out how to stop that. So.
And Lieutenant Molina, I guess I'll go to you next. Do you guys have a definition at all of cybercrime, or kind of what are the parameters around it that you deal with?
Well, our organization deals with all types of cybercrime, from hacking and software piracy to persons crimes such as stalking, harassment, luring and enticement, and sexual exploitation of children. So we run the whole gamut at our organization. So as far as cybercrime, it goes from financial crimes through to person crimes.
And from a FERPA, HIPAA standpoint, how are those issues addressed from a law enforcement perspective? I'm guessing that they're not, but just to make sure that we understand that.
We don't usually deal with that kind of stuff. However, we have had 2 cases where former medical employees, upon separation from employment, have taken patient records in order to use those records to create false identities and actually sell the information. That wasn't really compromising the network, as the information was readily available to them, but there should have been some more security as far as allowing someone that was already separated to get access to it.
Yeah.
Brian, there's a Stark law passed, which means you cannot formally exchange referrals for dollars. And so I'm just, I know it's silly, but people will exchange patient information for money under the table, and that's where I think a lot of folks are afraid on the, once information gets starting to be exchanged online or via email, that people are going to start hacking into that, and I think that's the stuff that individuals could be leery of, especially from the customer basis. And from the financial standpoint, national average is if a HIPAA is breached, 37% of your clients sever that relationship. They do not come back to you, and over 50% of them don't use you near as frequent. So there's a huge financial burden to your clinic. So it comes back to get you more than ways than one.
Yeah, it seems to me like it really comes back to trust and how you trust information with your employees, how you trust information really between the physicians and the patients, between the administrators and the students. And I'm curious to know, it seems to me like there are a lot more of these techniques that are being used by criminals to kind of bypass that trust. And now we start to get into more of the predator kind of components of cybercrime. Maybe, Jeremy, would you want to talk a little bit about that and kind of some of the techniques that you guys see people using from a predator standpoint, or even to try and do phishing type of targeting?
Certainly. We do a lot of talks and try and educate the kids and the public about some of the online predators. And so I just want to start off by saying that they're everywhere. And an online predator could be somebody that's trying to get into your bank account, or maybe trying to get close to your children. And so there's a vast degree of the online predator. A lot of times we do the talking with the kids, and we talk about the online predator that's trying to entice them to meet them. But basically, they're out there all over the place, and you're going to use a vast amount of techniques to try and get into your bank account or talk to who they need to talk to.
So what are some of the things that we should be doing, or that people should be doing from a personal standpoint to protect themselves?
Well, I think one of the things that we need to realize is that just because it's online, that we need to look at it from a standpoint as if it was real life, as if it was something, the neighbor down the street or something like that. We get kind of out of touch that the virtual world won't affect us and that it's not really here, but it really is. And if you wouldn't trust your kids to go to the playground by themselves, then maybe you shouldn't turn them loose onto Facebook by themselves. We really need to put just some steps as far as parenting in place on things like that, so that the same things would apply as if your child was going down the street. As far as your bank account and just protecting your assets and things like that from phishing, there's a lot of common sense things that would apply, and that spans quite a distance as well.
So, Lieutenant, we talk a little bit about being in a small town, and we feel somewhat sheltered being in Kirksville. Talk to us a little bit about what you guys are looking at from a broader perspective in more urban environments, and what people should do to protect themselves.
I think the detective pretty much nailed it right on the head. I'm sure they're seeing exactly what we're seeing. Going to forums and talking to other agencies and other detectives, and it's similar all across the board. I don't think size of town or community or city has anything to do with it. And just to add a little bit of what the detective said, when we talk about the predators, the grooming process also can expand into that of the adults, where they feel safe online and people are taking advantage of them in order to get monies paid to them. They draw on their emotions just like they would children, but also to adults into dragging them into financial schemes.
And do you see certain segments of the population being targeted more for that? I mean, obviously we think of senior citizens typically as being a more targeted audience for like telephone crimes.
We see a lot of senior citizens being victimized in those kind of financial schemes because we have a lot of retirees here in Arizona. Everyone from across the country wants to move here, and I think the scammers know that. But we also, with the economy and a lot of the unemployed folks looking for jobs, while they're online looking for jobs, they're also being compromised and involved in financial schemes, albeit unwittingly. At some point when we talk to them, they pretty much tell us that they know that something wasn't right. So we're seeing it with the elderly, we're seeing it with middle-aged, and we're seeing it with kids also.
Tim, we talk about common sense approaches to some of this stuff, but we don't. A lot of us don't have common sense with new things, new technologies, new things that are just being learned. What are some of those common sense things that might not be easy for people to react when they start using new technology?
Well, I think one of the biggest things is anytime somebody gets into using the computers, and again, as I said, the elderly, at one time, a lot of the issues centered around phone calls and people, preying on them, and now more and more of the elderly are getting involved in the electronics and having computers so that they can stay connected to their families and stuff. And so, unfortunately, when that happens, again, we have these scams that are going on out there where they're sending out emails or stuff, requesting bank information or other financial information or personal information. And the thing that we try to stress the most when we talk to people and stuff is that, if your bank, if it's a legitimate thing from your bank, they already have your information, and so they shouldn't be calling you to verify that. And so, if you can get those red flags to go off in people's heads when they're seeing this stuff, you get the email that says you won $500,000, but you got to send $2,000 to collect it. People are so eager to have that success and the finances at times that they'll do anything to send that money, thinking they're going to get something in return, and it just doesn't happen. And then again, we're very trusting with everyone, and so we talk to the kids a lot, and it applies to the parents and everyone else about sharing passwords and stuff. One thing we try to stress with the kids is, if you have your social networking pages and you're sharing passwords with your friends and everyone, they may be friends today, and this afternoon they may be fighting over a boy or girl, and they're not friends, and then those people have access to their accounts and can go in and do things. And unfortunately, as adults, we do that same thing. We tend to feel comfortable with people, and so we give out passwords and stuff that then end up jeopardizing our personal information and our situations. And we put ourselves in a lot of those things because we don't really think through it, and we don't think that someone's going to get us or that we're going to be a victim. But unfortunately, many of us are victims.
Yeah, we see the same thing within IT. You talk about it. It sounds so common sense, but a lot of these guys are getting so good at making it easy and building that some kind of trust to give your password out. Within IT, we see schemes where people will give their password to even to help desk personnel at times. We don't want that information. We want to get people in the mindset of, I never share this information with anybody. Right. And there's never a reason that we should be doing it.
Well, as Lieutenant mentioned earlier, it's a grooming process with kids when you're dealing with predators, but it's a grooming process with adults when you have them online. And people get online and they start having conversations. And the thing that we really try to stress to when we talk to people is, you can't trust anybody who's online. And one of the examples we use for the kids is, you have to be 16 to set up a Facebook account, and almost every kid you talk to, 12 on up, has a Facebook account, which means they lied to get it set up. And so that's part of our point to them, is that if you can lie to set up your account, the people that you talk to can lie to you. And if you're not there face to face with them and you don't know them, then you really can't believe anything they're telling you. So as these people are building, and even time does not equal the fact that you're going to know this person. So even if you talk to somebody online for 30 days, you still don't know anything about that person. Whatever they tell you is what they tell you. And so we have to get people to understand that, unless you're face-to-face with somebody and can see their reactions and see who they are and what they're doing, what you get told on the internet should always just be a big red flag for you.
I think it's hard to build those habits. And I'm thinking of things, maybe to go back to HIPAA, where you're so used to having conversations with people in the office about your work. How, Adam, do you try to build a habit so that people don't talk about other patients' information? I mean, is that a difficult thing?
Yes. It's a very catty workplace. I'll just start off with that, and it's a culture that you have to start building off, where every day you have to remind them what you're trying to do, and your number one goal is patient satisfaction and patient care, and that involves HIPAA, that involves that we have other competitors, and that all plays into customer satisfaction, and that involves privacy through just being appreciative. And so, yeah, definitely.
I'm going to go to Deanna and ask her the same question, because I have a daughter now who's a freshman at the local university here at Truman State University. Well, of course, we know lots of administrators who work at Truman, and there's some level of propriety that has to be built on what they can and cannot say about my daughter's grades or other information that she's sharing with people there. And I'm wondering, Deanna, do you run into those kinds of issues too?
I don't notice it so much in the community, but certainly within our offices, I'll walk through. Someone was frustrated after hanging up the phone, and there might be a conversation that assumes about the aid type that they're receiving. It may be the end of the term and grades come in, somebody's failed, and it might be somebody that everyone's familiar with, and so there's some names, a discussion that occurs maybe in the office. One of the more interesting concerns that I see is sometimes we get the board scores, and so for our DO graduates, we know how many attempts someone has had as far as passing those boards that are required for their license, and it makes it unique being here and so closely affiliated with the hospital, because some of those people later end up being physicians that are working at our hospital, and then you'll see them in the hallways, and there's a level of concern certainly that I have there, and trying to encourage others that it's not something that is to be discussed, and we process it and we move on, and it doesn't need to be discussed amongst everyone that needed to see it.
Yeah, so I mean, I think when you're familiar with people and you know them outside of technology, it's difficult not to share that information, or it can be difficult not to share that information. But now as we start moving into the world of social media, where we're interacting more with people that we don't necessarily know outside of technology, it probably becomes all that much more difficult. And we start to blur the lines in between those. And so I'm wondering, Tim, you talked a little bit about kids having these Facebook or Twitter accounts or whatnot. Is it safe for them to have those accounts? Can it be safe for them to have those accounts?
Well, obviously, when we talk to the kids, we try to tell them that, the computer world is great. We don't want them not to be on the computer world, but we obviously want them to be careful about what they're doing and the information that they're putting out there, and names, date of births, too much information like that. We're seeing kids that have their identities stolen, and then when they get old enough to apply for credit and stuff, they've got those problems. And so we try to point those things out to them and talk to them about ways that they can be safe. One of the amazing things is when you go talk to all these kids and you start asking them how many Facebook friends they have, there's a large majority of them that'll have 1,000, 1,500 Facebook friends, and or even more. And you'll ask them, do you actually know all these people? Well, the answer is no. And so then, what we try to tell them is, well, you can probably imagine that some of those people that you don't know are predators that are out there just keeping track of what you're doing, waiting for an opportunity to make contact with you. So, if you have that many people and you don't know them, why are you not going home and removing them from your Facebook page? So I think they can safely be on Facebook, but again, as Jeremy said earlier, parents have to get involved. I mean, these computers shouldn't be sitting in their bedrooms with the doors shut and not knowing what's going on. And, we try to stress to the kids that you shouldn't be doing anything on the computer that you wouldn't want your teachers or your parents to know what you're doing, or if any of that information come out, it shouldn't be anything that bothers you. And if you have kids who are doing those things, then somebody's probably not paying much attention to what they're doing anyway. So, I mean, we try to stress that, your parents should know your password. Your parents should be able to see who you talk to and who your friends are. But even if they don't be surprised if one of your friends' parents show up with something you posted, because it's going to get out there and they're going to find it. And so, they can do it safely, but it takes a lot of, supervision, I think, at times.
Lieutenant Molina, what kind of advice do you give parents for getting kids involved or supervising kids on social media?
Most of the parents that we talk to, they'll give us a statement such as, well, my child is only playing video games, or my child is only in XYZ social media site. And they think that it's the parents that think it's safe. And what I tell them, just like the chief said, is they have to approach it just like they approach the real world. And just like they would instruct their kids not to talk to strangers at a park, they need to instruct their kids not to talk to strangers while interacting on the internet. They have to approach it the same way. And I kind of use a Saturday night example. If they had a teenager that was going out on Saturday night, they want to know where they're going, who they're going with, when they're going to be back, and what they're going to be doing. And if we use those 4 questions for internet activity, where are you going? What sites are you going to be visiting on the internet? Who are you going to be talking to? Who are you going to be with? Is it just friends from school? And that should be the answer. It shouldn't be friends that I've met online. What are you going to be doing? Well, we're going to be chatting, or we're going to be playing video games. And then the big question also is, when are you coming home on Saturday? Is how long are you going to be on? How long are you going to be online? Because they shouldn't be online for hours and hours on end. And if the parents start with that, I think that's a good foundation, so they are learning what their kids are doing. And then they need to continue to teach them to be safe just like they do out in the real world.
I'm wondering if the mobile environment makes this all that much more difficult. You know, it's one thing like, you know, Chief King said, you know, to have the computers in a visible part of the house, but when more and more of our kids are taking cell phones, or our employees have cell phones that they're bringing into the office, I think that makes cybersecurity all that much more difficult in that environment. I'm wondering, Jeremy, do you guys see the mobile world having a big impact on cyber security, and what do we think about it? What do we do about it?
Yeah, we've seen a growing trend with the mobile technology. As with any technology, it's got its benefits and its drawbacks. Obviously, the benefits are that we can access more information, you know, whether it's Facebook or the internet with our phone now. But the problem is it creates a lot of problems probably with your HIPAA, where people might have a way to transfer some of those records through their phone, whether they take a picture of something or somebody. You know, things like that can certainly be a big problem, and we see a growing problem with that at the schools. And I'm sure to some degree it's even inhibited some of the learning environment, just because schools are trying to deal with, you know, the cyberbullying and kids on their phone, a whole gamut of issues that's come up that we didn't have in the past.
Yeah, you know, we don't worry so much about bullying here at ATSU, but the issue that we really get into or start to think about more is cheating. The mobile space makes it the issues around cheating a lot more difficult to really get your arms around. There's been a lot in the paper lately about you know, some kids out east who had a whole group of people who were using their mobile phones to share standardized test answers, and one person would be really good at one topic, another person would be really good at another topic, and they would be using the mobile devices. That's a type of cybersecurity in my mind. You know, how do we secure our testing facilities in an age of mobile devices that are getting smaller and smaller?
That's a hard thing to answer. And I mean, you know, you're probably going to just have to set up, you know, things as they come in to test. They have to leave their phones or something at the front of the room and things. That's kind of what they're doing at the schools some. But again, you know, they're always going to figure out some way to be ahead of you. So no matter what you put in place, a week later that's going to have changed. And you know, that whole phone situation has really increased the cyberbullying issues and stuff that we have at school. You know, generally the kids had to wait till they got home to get on their computer, and now that everybody has a phone and stuff, you know, they can take pictures at school and send stuff out immediately. And so we've seen those things grow, as I'm sure everybody has. And so I don't know that there's ever a good answer as to how you're going to continue to control those things, but they're definitely going to be something we're going to battle with and deal with for a long, long time. I think I heard yesterday or the day before that the laptop era is on its way out because so many people have moved to the phones and PDAs and stuff and are getting away from even using their laptops. And so you know, you can see how that progresses and where we're going.
Yeah.
Well, I think in addition to that, too, is that the schools are introducing the use of tablets and other mobile devices, and they're not prepared. I know at my kids' school and other schools around, K through 12, they're using tablets in the schools and taking them home, and although the schools think that they're set up to where certain sites aren't accessible, we know that kids are smarter than we are, and they're getting around the securities and being able to access the sites that they aren't supposed to in order to engage in those cyberbullying activities.
What are some of the punishments or penalties that we're seeing for these cyber crimes? I mean, we've talked about cyberbullying, we've talked about identity theft. What's the range of punishment that can be levied against some of these crimes?
Here in Arizona, we have a computer crime statute that's fairly broad, so we can actually attach it to any one of the traditional crimes. So in addition to perhaps a stalking or harassment, which is only a Class 1 misdemeanor, we can add the computer tampering, which is using a computer for no legitimate purpose to intimidate or terrify, and that turns it into a felony, and it's a major felony of a Class 4. So in addition to those major felonies, with the enticement cases or luring for exploitation of minors, we're seeing Class 3s and Class 2s. So we're looking at, for possession of one picture of child pornography here in Arizona, it's anywhere from 15 to 24 years in prison. So Arizona takes it pretty seriously.
Yeah, that sounds pretty serious. What about Missouri?
Well, obviously ours are similar to theirs, but penalty ranges depend upon which way we file, whether we go through the feds to do that or whether we go through the states. And again, it depends on whether we're talking about enticement cases, whether we're talking about production of child pornography, things like that. Cyberbullying issues can, depending upon how far they go and what they are, can range from misdemeanor to felony charges. So all of those have different penalties and ranges. Of the cases, the cyberbullying cases that we've had for basically possession of child pornography and stuff, we're seeing probably on the average about 12 to 15-year prison sentences on those cases.
So certainly from a criminal standpoint, there's significant punishment. Deanna and Adam, I'm thinking from FERPA and HIPAA, it's probably more civil type penalties, maybe some criminal type penalties, but what are the cases that you're aware of, and kind of what are the punishments that you see for FERPA or HIPAA violations?
Well, they're just starting to come out. The Federal Trade Commission is starting to kind of get involved. They kind of made CVS, the big pharmaceutical company, they kind of made a name of them. They threw out a bunch of pharmaceutical old pill bottles with patients' names on them and med records in an open trash container, which wasn't very bright, a few years ago, and they got tapped for $2.7 million. And so that was kind of the big first penalty. And so when they settled that, then then they passed the new stimulus bill, they allocated $750 million to now start chasing down these HIPAA laws, and I'm guessing that they're going to be criminal since they allocated that funding for that. And as far as monitoring goes with our next-gen system, if somebody is in a patient chart, it says what individual has accessed that patient chart, so we can see who has been in there and if they should have been in there or not, which I think is a really nice indicator. So, I don't even go in there unless, there's been a discrepancy. So, if there's been an individual in a patient chart that's not inside their own respective clinic, especially, nursing staff or secretarial staff, then there is a discussion that's held. So I wanted to make people feel comfortable about that. We keep things departmentalized as far as patients go, and I think that is pretty, that's spread across most health industries now. Those EMR systems, they help keep a pretty nice tab on all the patient charts with those EMR systems.
So millions of dollars worth of penalties, though, are being fined.
They are on those big companies.
What about, Deanna, for FERPA violations? Are you aware of penalties?
It's pretty rare. If anything, you might get a warning at this point. and then they want to see what protocols you're putting into place to demonstrate that you take it seriously and that you're making improvements in those areas. Ultimately, what happens is that it does could cut off your federal financial funding. But as far as anything civil, it's one of those things, interesting enough, that a student cannot hold the institution liable. It strictly resides within the federal government and the Department of Education and the school. It's not something that can go to the civil level and then a student can file against the school. Interesting.
So, I mean, what I'm seeing here is kind of a maturity model where, you know, certainly some things are easily crimes, some cyber crimes are easily criminal activity, and we see those being punished pretty severely. The privacy parts are probably more nuanced and a little bit earlier in the maturity level, so we don't deal with them as much, and so it seems like the penalties, I would expect, will be increasing over time as that becomes more commonplace and people are being expected to know how to deal with privacy of information. Does that make sense? Is that what you're seeing or expecting?
Mm-hmm.
When we have a violation at ATSU, our protocol is to self-report ourselves to the Family Compliance Office. We notify the individuals whose information was compromised. We do so in writing and let them know our action. But we also give each of them a call when possible to make it personal and offer an apology. And then we send a formal report after we've worked with the violators and get their statements. We send a formal report to that Family Compliance Office letting them know that we take it serious, this is what we've done, and these are the improvements we're going to
make. As we think about the future a little bit, are there any technologies that are helping you guys in law enforcement? I know Adam talked a little bit about kind of logging and those kinds of things that we see with electronic medical records. I know we have the same kind of things for our student records, you know, who's accessing what kind of information. Are there tools on the law enforcement side that help you guys fight some of these crimes that are starting to come into play?
Yeah, Brian, there's a lot of tools that are out there. There's some tools that are within law enforcement that have been developed by law enforcement officers that help us, identify some of the child pornography offenders. There's also a lot of private software that's out there that's developed for doing forensics and additional analysis on things and really helps us do our job. A lot of the private sector software and things that help us are really expensive. And there's a lot of intensive training because it's continually evolving. Every time that the software is trying to look for is changing, then they have to change their software. And so it's something that just because you went through training last year doesn't mean that you're not going to have to go through it again. So we find ourselves kind of in a revolving door that we're constantly having to do training and try and find funding to continue what we're doing.
So the tools are great, but it seems to me like in addition to the tools, and maybe even more important to the tools, would be some training components or education components on how people can protect themselves to guard against some of these things. I know you guys do lots of public speaking engagements and whatnot to try and bring the awareness out there, but are there formal programs that are starting to be developed for people to learn how to deal with these things?
There are some programs that are out there. I know that like NetSmarts, and there's the Internet Crimes Against Children. They've developed programs and videos and things to try and put into the schools. I know that like the Attorney General's office in Missouri will put out things as far as phishing scams and try and education material on that end. So there's a lot of different things that are in the works, and people are trying to identify those problems. But just like Deputy Chief said earlier, these are constantly changing problems, and so what you try and educate on today isn't necessarily the same problem that you have tomorrow.
And Brian, the biggest thing that we've probably seen dealing with people is unless it's something that's hitting you in the face right then, it's not really a concern. And so we have a really good deal with getting the kids to listen and be involved and understand things, but we've tried very unsuccessfully several times to pull parents in just to do cyber safety talks to them. And again, if they don't think their sons and daughters doing anything but playing video games and there's nothing really going on, they're not interested. And so how to get past that mindset is something we work on all the time, but it's the same way with the public. Just like the events of 9/11, a lot of people don't spend much time thinking about that now because it's not there in the news and right there in their face. And unfortunately, that's the society that we live in. So it's hard to educate people who don't think they have an issue.
Yeah, I think that's exactly the parallel for the HIPAA and FERPA things. They're important topics, but when people are struggling to get their day-to-day jobs done, they don't have time to go to another day-long training on all of the little nuances of HIPAA violations or of FERPA. It's just like you say, it's not in their face. And that makes it really difficult to educate people on some of these issues. So I think these ideas like Cybersecurity Month, I mean, it sounds kind of trite, but I think they're actually valuable in that it does bring some awareness to these kinds of issues. And it's such a broad spectrum of issues. I mean, we've got HIPAA and child pornography in the same conversation, and you almost have to deal with each of those individually, like you said, and just try and get whatever is in someone's face and educate them at that moment in time.
Right, and unfortunately, if you have your identity stolen, then you usually become an advocate for other people, and you're spreading the word, telling them. But if you've not had that issue, you're not really interested in hearing about what to do to make sure you don't have your identity stolen. So.
And on the other hand, if I hear the word child pornography, I could care less about HIPAA. But they're both, extremely important.
Right.
Gene, anything coming through from the chat area that we should? I think I've hit a couple of them, but anything else?
No, I don't think so. I haven't seen anything else.
All right, good. Any last-minute thoughts from you guys trying to bring awareness to these cybersecurity issues? Hints that you can give us either from an organizational standpoint or from an individual standpoint? Adam, we'll just go right down the row.
I guess more just for the law enforcement, is there anything that they could help us out on in the future? Because I could just see with this patient portal thing, Brian and Kurt and I, we're going to have to meet a lot more in the future because, the more that the patients are going to be accessing the servers, and I know they're encrypted and I know they're safe, but still, the more we get towards 2014 and the more that there's going to be patients accessing their information online, I just think it would be nice to involve the law enforcement on that process and maybe what's going on.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. We talk about identity theft a lot, but we don't really talk a lot about identity assurance. And I think as we have more and more people who are accessing things like healthcare portals or banking information or whatnot, it becomes just as important to be assured that the person who is saying who they are is that person. Mm-hmm. So there's an assurance component as well as the identity theft component.
Well, and unfortunately for law enforcement in that areas, I mean, we're not going to be able to, run checks and stuff for you to make sure the person you're dealing with is doing that. I mean, we're going to be coming in, unfortunately, after the fact, and many times in many cases. So, I mean, the biggest thing that we could probably do to help assist you is just help with more of your education component, because again, our hands are somewhat tied on what information we can give you, as well as when we try to get information from you. We're kind of in that same boat. If nothing criminally has actually happened yet, then I'm pretty limited on what I can actually offer you for assistance in those
what
ways.
We might do then is, if that's okay, is use you guys as an education reference when it comes time to do that about being safe with your patient information.
Well, and I think most of the things that apply to not only internet predators and just general fraud and stuff is going to apply to exactly what you're talking about by your HIPAA and your FERPA violations and stuff as well.
Yeah.
Lieutenant, any last-minute thoughts, and how do you guys balance that kind of proactive approach versus reactive approach? I mean, I think there's a lot of truth in the fact that law enforcement can't get involved until something bad happens. But there's some proactive things we can do, right?
That's right. Most of the time we are reactive only because everything is always changing, whether it's switching from MySpace to Facebook or the new and evolving from PCs to tablets. we have to be reactive. When we try to be proactive and we try to get the parents involved, just like the deputy chief says, we travel through all the school districts in the county and do safety presentations, and we see 10 parents out of an entire district attend. We need to get the parents involved, and some of the information that they learn to keep their kids safe, they can translate into their adult life, keeping their bank account information safe, keeping their patient information account safe. But the parents have to get involved. They're the ones that are going to have to disseminate the information to the kids. And unless they become active in their role, we're going to be fighting an uphill battle all the time.
Yeah. Deanna, I'll leave it with you for the last word. Anything from your perspective, kind of future thoughts or hints that you'd offer to people?
I think for ATSU and the concern is just thinking about what you're sending and where it's going. I think you feel protected when it's within your email. I think also we get in too much of a rush and we're not thinking about what we're attaching, we're not rechecking it. And the other piece that has happened more than once for us in the last year is mistyping or allowing the email to fill in the rest of making the assumption of who it's going to. And so we have things that maybe needed to go to a staff member and got sent to a student with the same last name, or possibly the first initial last name, but this, just the differences with the middle initial, and sensitive information has made it into the hands of students when it was intended to go directly to a staff member. So it's slowing down. I think electronics becomes, hurry, hurry, rush. We read as much as we can and we get those emails sent out. But we need to slow down and think about what we're doing and be more careful.
Yeah. So I think if I were to sum up kind of what I'm hearing, it's use common sense in the electronic world as much as you do in the physical world for information. When people are asking you for information, if it doesn't pass your normal filters, probably something's wrong. And then get involved is probably the second message, especially if you're a parent. Get involved in these issues so that you can talk to your kids a little bit better, as well as learn some things for yourself. I want to thank you guys. I know it's kind of tough bridging so many different areas. There's such a wide variety of areas, but I think it's worthwhile for us to start thinking about these things more holistically rather than just in each individual bailiwick. It's really a nice community service that you guys do. So thanks to the law enforcement guys, and thanks to our ATSU team too.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we'll sign it off there.